Welcome to the Feehery podcast, brought to you by EFB Advocacy. EFB means excellent for business. Actually, EFB means Easton Feehery Belmar. We have John Easton.
Hi there.
We have Adam Belmar. I'm Jon Feehery. And we've got Clark Kent, the newest addition to the Feehery family and the newest addition to EFB. He's here for the day. Take your Clark Kent to work day. Clark Kent is a rescue dog. He's around 10 years old. He doesn't have any teeth. Our next door neighbor, Wendy Grubbs, gave him to us so we can keep an eye on him, and he's a great little dog. And this is a shameless pitch for a viral sharing. And if you are watching the EFB Feehery podcast brought to you by EFB, and you like it, please share it with your friends. Because we really enjoy doing this. And if you want to be on the show, let us know, and we will put you on the show because we have that much exclusivity.
Yeah, John, we've been at this for a year now almost, and it's been quite successful. But sometimes folks will watch it, but what we really want is to give it a like, give it a share, and you know what? If you like Clark Kent, let us know. Maybe Clark can stick with us for our podcast.
That would be awesome. John, what do you think about Clark Kent at our podcast?
I welcome all newcomers to the podcast.
There was Fishman Corner, and now there's Clark Kent Cuddles.
I will say that Clark Kent's probably not going to say much, but he might bark at a few things that he agrees with us on, right? Clark
or
Kent?
disagrees with.
Or disagrees, that's
which we welcome as well.
Talk about agreeing and disagreeing. Theory one, Vive Le Trump. Washington was overwhelmed by the love that President Trump and President Macron of France had for one another. It was a bromance of all bromances. They were touching, cuddling, feeling one another in such a way that it made me a little bit uncomfortable.
Kind of like this.
Kind of like this.
Is this making you feel uncomfortable, Mr. Easton?
No, I was using a good analogy.
Yes.
Let me say this. I thought the President Macron's address to Congress was very well received. I thought the state dinner that really organized by Melania Trump was a huge hit, the first state dinner that the president had for any president. John Easton, looking and thinking about this, does this mean something good for France and the United States? Is this a turning point in that relationship? Or is this just kind of transactional? This is 1 week in a whole life of the presidency.
It's a good question. I think it's good for the United States and good for France just in general. And forget about the major players in this play, which are the president and both presidents. But I think that these visits from our very, very important allies are really key. And I think that we need to do them often, and in part because it's a reminder of how important they are to us. It is a reminder that no matter, all friends have ups and downs. We do with France, we do with the UK, we do with Canada. But these are our most important allies. And I think what President Macron did really, really well was, he just displayed a savvy with our president. And then he displayed a savvy with our Congress when he went and he addressed with a joint session, and he was able to talk about his priorities, which is fine. That's what he's here to do. But he played the White House, the trip, the state dinner, the trip to Mount Vernon. He played that extremely well. I was very impressed, and I thought, President Trump did as well. I don't know about all this bromance, holding hands, and all this stuff was fun fodder. But it's nice to see when two leaders, world leaders, get along well.
Adam Belmar, you've been involved in these state visits before, working at the White House. What did you think of the staging of it all?
So, when I worked at the White House as Deputy Communications Director, the image of the president, what we see through the lens, was my charge. And I came to find out that the playbook for a state arrival ceremony and a state dinner are fairly tried and true. They're very complex. They have a good number of historical elements. There's a review of the troops. There's the fife and drum corps on the South Lawn. I thought they executed it particularly well. And I think I agree with John Easton that it was a great image and really put a little bit of luster on the president as a foreign leader. Now, the excessive touching and the awkwardness, not unlike what I am doing right now with Clark Kent, was very weird and to some people off-putting. And so I don't know what else to say about that except to say that the president can be quite awkward in some occasions, and he was with the president of France. But I particularly enjoyed the forthrightness and the articulate English that the French president used when he spoke to the joint session of Congress, Jon Favreau. And I also was very proud of our First Lady. I thought she acquitted herself very well this week.
Just thinking about France, and I'm a Francophile. I love French wine. I love French cheese. I love France. I love Paris. And I'm much more of a Francophile than a lover of Great Britain, for example. As a relationship with the French, though, it's been very tempestuous. They're our oldest ally, but sometimes we're with them, and sometimes we are kind of with them. They were the first members of NATO, one of the first members of NATO, but then they dropped out of NATO because of de Gaulle. And France has always been struggling to have relevance, although it's a very important country in Europe, and I think culturally very, very important. France joined us in the attack on Syria, which was a big deal, I thought. Macron was trying to show that France is here and with us. John Easton, there were other things that Macron was trying to get out of this. The climate deal and the Iran deal, that was kind of his bottom line, right?
Yeah.
And so, thinking about that, how did Macron handle the romance, bromance / bigger policy goals? Do you think that he achieved his goals with his visit?
He has demonstrated that he's a very smart guy because I think he has studied Trump. You study him through the 2016 campaign and really last year, and that's really what you have to study. Yes, you can study his real estate magnate times, but I think that he studied him and knew that the best way to try to advance some of his policy goals was to have a bromance with this guy. President Trump is so subject to flattery. The French know how to flatter, and they've got style, and Melania Trump is a symbol of style. So I think there were a lot of ways in which President Macron could make some inroads there. But when it came right down to his policy objectives, those were clearly stated in his joint session of Congress, his speech, and I thought he dual-tracked it, and he dual-tracked it really well.
So, Ed, I'm thinking about this Macron vis-a-vis Angela Merkel and Theresa May.
What a contrast, right?
I mean, but think about this, really out of the Europeans, Macron is the only guy that Trump can hang out with. And he's very uncomfortable with either May or Merkel, which I think there's some of a sexist thing there.
Well, I don't know if it's sexist, but I think the president clearly has an easier time in his interpersonal relationships with men. He's been very positive in his own organization in promoting women. I don't doubt that. But he is prone to locker room talk and other things, and he just seemed to get along very well, where he certainly didn't with the two world leaders that you just mentioned.
And I'm going to throw a shout out for two things, and they're more of style of this visit. And one was the hat.
The hat.
Melania Trump's white brim was gorgeous, and she wore it well.
She did wear it well.
Yep, she wore it well. And from everything you read from the inside of the planning of the state dinner, et cetera, was she was in control of everything. And so kudos to her for pulling off a near perfect dinner. But the other thing was related to the state dinner at the White House was the wine selection. They chose a Oregon Pinot Noir.
How did I know that was coming?
No, it's very serious. An Oregon Pinot Noir Domaine Drouin from the Lorraine Vineyard, and a Domaine Drouin Chardonnay. Those were two of the three wines that were served. Now, the motto of Domaine Drouin in the Willamette Valley is French soul and Oregon soil. Oh. And I think these vines were, imported from France, planted in Oregon, so they do indeed have a French soul. And you've got to try this wine, Domaine Drouin Pinot Noir. Go for it.
So we're going to wrap it up there, but I do agree with you that if you can get French wine made in America, that's like the best case scenario.
That.
Theory 2, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That's what Kanye West raps. Hashtag MAGA. M-A-G-A. The controversial artist who once bluntly declared that George W. Bush hates black people has declared himself an admirer of President Trump. Is this a turning point in the Trump presidency, or is this a turning point in Kanye West's career? And by Trump presidency up or Kanye West's career down? What do you think? Are you a Kanye West fan?
No.
Oh, all right.
I'm a Clark Kent fan. But Clark and I have discussed this before the show. We have listened to some of Kanye's music, but we don't necessarily consider ourselves fans, and I don't think this is evocative of any turning point in anything at all. Hopefully, it is just one more weird thing that happened this week. I think Kanye should say what he feels, as most people should. And sometimes I think people are just very contrarian in order to get the public riled up and get themselves in the news. And I'm chalking this whole thing up to that.
John Easton, we talked a little bit about the genre of rap music, which is very controversial. I like some rap. I like all kinds of music. But I think it is evocative of a scene out there in the country where people they use kind of language that is inappropriate for our kids, but it's evocative of a street scene. I think Kanye West is brilliant, kind of like Eminem, but also he's controversial. The thing I most admire about Kanye West is that he speaks his mind. Now I don't always agree with him, but he always speaks his mind. What are your thoughts on this? Is this a big deal, or is this something that's just made up and blown out of proportion?
Well, what's the bigger deal? What Kanye West has said or is saying, particularly through tweeting, or the reaction?
Yeah, that's kind of my point.
The reaction is the shock, the horror, and really what we're coming into is this chapter of really sheer moral judgment on who you support or who you don't support politically. And instead of saying, as a reaction to this, particularly among the celebrity circles, is what do you think about what Kanye said? Instead of saying, this is politics, and I don't agree with his politics, but that's politics, and he has his right to believe what he believes. Instead, it's a complete condemnation, and they'll go as far as saying, and I read one the other day who said, I love Kanye, I really don't believe he believes what he's saying. So it's that as well. It's right. He must not believe what he is saying. And I just think this is so utterly destructive from either side of the aisle to be making these kind of judgments on people for what people actually personally believe, and you try to shame them into believing something different.
Part of what is at hand with the Kanye thing, I think, is the negativity or the shade that he has shown President Obama, right? You're a Chicago guy. One of the comments that he made was the president was, when I say the president, Barack Obama, president for 8 years, nothing changed in Chicago. We've seen the unbelievable violence and gun violence and crime right there. So he's making a point, which is a personal point that he wants to make. I don't know why it should carry such enormous problems for everybody. It's demonstrably true.
Well, and remember, Barack Obama called Kanye West an asshole.
Or a jackass.
Something like that. Called him, and Jon Favreau just tweeted out that Kanye West is an asshole. So, there is a real thing there. And I think that West is certainly right to say that the statistics weren't that great for the African-American community throughout the most of President Obama's tenure. And they've markedly improved during the Trump administration. So you can say that you can make the case there. I think that John's point is really interesting, which is if you come out in favor, if you're any kind of celebrity and you come out in favor of President Trump, you have to be ready for a backlash. Roseanne Barr came out and said she's actually doing a whole TV series that's pro-Trump, and they had huge ratings at the first. There's a little bit of a backlash that she's facing.
I've watched the show, by the way. I like it.
Oh, there you go. I have not watched the show. I tend to just watch the Golf Channel. But I will say that, John, talking about the culture and Donald Trump's view that you need to kind of capture the culture to get on and have these cultural touchstones to have an influence. It's not just about policy; it's also about culture. Talk a little bit about that. Talk a little bit about how the Trump philosophy and why Kanye West could be important on this whole thing.
Well, I think part of this is a game, and I think Kanye knows exactly what he's doing. And in this era of ratings and how many followers you have, and this actually could in the end be a net positive for Kanye. Who knows? But I also think it's interesting to see how celebrities react to what you're saying. This backlash.
Right.
Some are just comfortable with it, and they say we're going to write it. And we're going to see where it goes. And, hey, more attention is good attention. Then there are others. I was just reading this piece, and you guys probably saw it too, on Shania Twain. So she said, had I been in the country at the time, I would have voted for Donald Trump. Well, the backlash was severe. In fact, this columnist from the Miami Herald, who got some play on this, said, basically, people who support Trump have nothing to say to me or me to them. I mean, that was his conclusion in taking down Shania Twain for saying what she did. Like, how could she possibly say something like that, right? I mean, it was a complete moral condemnation of a very popular country singer. And Shania has really backed up, and she apologized, actually, for what she said.
Profile and courage.
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. So I
You may as well way to stick up for yourself.
Right. Well, I mean, I think she probably looked at it and said, not worth it. Not worth it. I don't want to lose fans. I don't want to lose followers. I don't want that's too hot for me. And Kanye West's apparently his reaction is the opposite, doubling down. He sent out a tweet this morning, right?
Right, he did, and I think that some rap stars are supporting Kanye. Like Common came out and said, I don't agree with what he says, but I agree that he should be able to say it. Kim Kardashian came out in support of her hubby. So this is all, I think it's all fascinating.
It takes courage to hold a dog on a podcast. It takes courage to speak your mind.
It takes more courage to hold a dog in a podcast. And, this dog,
It's a rescue dog.
Clark Kent, has been spectacular. He hasn't said a word, but his quiet presence has really elevated the whole conversation.
It's inspirational.
Inspirational. Theory 3, blue wave theory. Dysfunction at the presidential level. Republicans barely winning in a seat that they had won by 21 points in Arizona, losing in Pennsylvania, losing in Alabama. Are the Republicans really doomed, or is the national media missing the real story? John Easton, are the Republicans doomed?
I think we should all take a breath and put it in a proper context. That context is that this is a midterm election of a president's first term. Let's just stop right there for a second. And those are always difficult, no matter what party occupies the White House. Those are difficult
Just know
times.
your history.
Yeah. And so in that vein, I think that it is going to be difficult for Republicans to maintain control of the House. They definitely have a shot at it. I think it's going to be difficult. In the Senate, I think that it is going to be very difficult for Democrats to take the seats necessary to take the Senate.
So, Adam Belmar, talking about presidential dysfunction, and I'm talking now more about what's happening at the cabinet level.
If you or someone you know suffers from presidential dysfunction. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, that's an excellent point. So let's talk a little bit about Ronnie Jackson, because the president says this guy should be my VA, Veterans Affairs Secretary, and then he can't be.
Well, look, I personally know Admiral Ronnie Jackson. I served with him in the White House. I know him as a colleague. I considered him a friend. And as a medical professional, he was looking out for me while we traveled to many, many foreign nations on missions for the president. I just think he's a wonderful guy. I never, in my wildest dreams, nor he, I think, ever saw himself as Secretary of Veterans Affairs. I just personally am saddened by the political attacks that have, put his entire career in jeopardy. But I also think the president was ill-advised to just, without much thought, nominate someone to such an important job. The Veterans Affairs cabinet post is a leadership role. It's not a management role. but both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, have come together to say we've got to fix this. And the former Secretary Shulkin was well received. He was appointed by a Democrat, but people felt like things were moving forward there. They want to see progress. And John Easton can tell you in the United States Senate, they take oversight of the Veterans Affairs Department very seriously. And so this was not a joke. And it seems like the president toyed with the whole idea of the leadership of this cabinet post in a way that just wasn't truly respectful of the senators, their job to give advice and consent. Clark Kent and I are sad, but we're going to get over it.
Clark, the way you work the dog in.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty good.
VA means veterans. This is just a veteran of many battles.
He's been through so many battles.
Yeah, and
he's found a home at EFB.
One of the things that I would say to John Easton, President Trump is attacking Jon Tester, who is in a very red state in Montana, over his torpedoing of his his pick, Ronnie Jackson. Do you think that this is going to hurt Tester?
No, I don't think it's going to hurt Tester. I think that's a very shallow choice of an attack on John. I think you can attack Senator Tester on a lot of things, the tax bill being number one, but this isn't. And I think Adam's point's a very good one about the Senate. Obviously, it takes its role of oversight very, very seriously. It takes its role in confirmation seriously, and I think. Look no further than Johnny Isakson on this situation. He's the chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee, and he was trying to back channel the White House, saying, "Guys, get this out of play because this has nowhere good is going to come out of this." So I feel like this was a bit of a disservice to Ronnie Jackson, and I think that I hate to say it, but it's a disservice to veterans who rely on the Veterans Administration to take care of their health care and their benefits. And now we're faced with even longer and much longer time period without a leader at the helm of the Veterans Affairs Committee. You can point fingers, but these nominations, as Adam Belmar knows so well coming out of the White House, they have to be airtight. And, I was kind of on the receiving end, staffing in the Senate. These senators want to know that the names that are being forwarded to them for consideration have been vetted thoroughly, that there are going to be no surprises on the senators in confirmation hearings, walking down the hallway, getting ambushed by reporters. They want to know that the names that they're being forwarded are, especially the same party, are good ones that they can defend. And on this one, they couldn't defend this. There were too many allegations coming out.
So, John, all of this is kind of a big Washington battle. Jobless claims are at their lowest level since 1968. It was just announced today. The trade deficit has gone down 25%, lowest level in like 10 years. What's more important, Washington's dysfunction or a growing economy? And an economy that's bursting through the seams. A fact that people are working in all kinds of different places. What's more important?
Well, I'll just there's not even a question. And I think Washington has displayed dysfunction for how long now? I mean, it's just as far back as we can really remember. It's been stated as being a dysfunctional place and an unpopular place. But I think, and I know I've said this on this podcast before, but I think it's really. Economy is going great. As long as people are feeling it, wages are going up, and there are benefits to point to, economic benefits to point to for the average working American. But I believe that has to defeat the hump of Donald Trump's behavior.
Yeah, the economy is everything, and all of the statistics you're pointing to are critically important. They will inform the voters' minds. But I also think it would be wrong to just say that the dysfunction isn't acknowledged. People see it. It is permeating outside of Washington, D.C.'s news. And at the same time, we've had a little bit of good news this week that the Secretary of State nominee, Mike Pompeo, got reported out favorably from the Foreign Relations Committee. All of this matters. The president needs to be able to keep all these balls in the air, but I do ultimately agree that come election time, it's all about whether you're better off today than you were 2 or 4 years ago.
Let me sum up by saying I think that Washington dysfunction is a feature of Washington and has been for a while. I would say that the president, I think, is looking more and more presidential when he has these great events with the president of France, who treats him like a human being, and then with the possibility of having real peace break out in North Korea. And the fact that the president does have a point on the Iran deal, which was not that great of a deal, and the climate change thing, which was a disaster, and when you have this economy growing so strongly, that really helps make the case for Republicans. But Republicans have to understand that there is going to be, as John pointed out, a huge backlash because it's a midterm election, and the liberal progressive wing of this country are energized. And if you talk to any member of Congress, they know how energized they are. So if Republicans don't run their best campaigns, they're going to lose.
That's right. And I think if there is a silver lining for Republicans as you look at the map, and I want to talk about the Senate in particular, it's that there are really good candidates running.
Yeah.
And like, for instance, if you got a guy like Joe Manchin in West Virginia, former governor, I mean, he is a solid incumbent, right? And I think Adam was pointing this out before. I mean, you got to beat Joe Manchin with somebody. Now, you've got two very legitimate congressmen that are vying for the primary. I mean, this is just an example.
Well, one's a congressman, the other's the attorney general.
The attorney general, that's right. So, but statewide, resumes,
right,
legitimate. And if you go down the list of just the toss-up races, every one of them has very credible Republicans on running in those races. So I think that's a little bit of taking a grain of salt with this, is that it's just you can't overreact to these headlines.
And one last point: the Nationals have had a really bad start, and so we've got about 6 or 7 months till we get to the World Series. The Nationals still could come back, and I think the same way about Republicans. We're pretty far away from the actual World Series, and so it's too early to predict, Adam Belmar. That's my point.
Okay.
Adam, let's go to you. What are you buying or selling today?
Well, I am buying Boeing. Let me just say, I love, as a public relations and communication strategist here in Washington, to look closely at what other people are doing. Well, this week, the Boeing company is up with a new public affairs and marketing campaign for a drone that is intended to fly off of aircraft carriers and refuel jets in midair. It's completely unmanned, and it's just the coolest thing I ever saw. I didn't know anything about it. Obviously, the Pentagon does. They're looking at it. It looks like they're going to make some decisions about aerial refueling drones later this year. I was so impressed with the way that they marketed this, the way that they're showing it off. Obviously, there are people who really need to know how it works, but for the rest of us, I'm a proud American who thinks Boeing gets 2 thumbs up, and I'm looking to buy Boeing this week.
Wow, Jason.
That was quite a buy. You're not buying the dog?
I kind of have the dog.
I'm going to sell first, and I'll do that quickly. The NFL draft. I love football. I always have, always will. But I find few things more boring than the NFL draft, in part because a lot of these guys aren't even going to
make the team.
They may not even make the team, let alone make the starting unit. Anyway, I find it a bore. But for those of you, it's starting today through Sunday. Have fun. It's going to be great. But I am buying Sonos, which is the in-home wireless speaker system that talks to your
we have a couple here at the
music
office.
Streaming service. Yeah, the initial public offering is happening.
Ooh, this is a good tip.
Yep, and so this is kind of a real buy, like a real market buy, and I just this is some beautiful technology that I've been using now for probably 6-7 years, and buy.
You know what's very interesting about Sonos? John Easton turned me on to it, but they have really, with both hands, grabbed onto Alexa and some of these talkback services that allow you now to integrate voice control over the Sonos speakers. It's very interesting, and they're very nimble.
Yep.
How much is a Sonos system?
Not cheap.
Depends what you want.
Okay, well, that's helpful.
Right.
So I'm going to sell the White House Correspondents' Dinner weekend. This is when annual gathering when all these so-called celebrities come into Washington and schmooze with all the media, and they have all these media parties and all these, faux celebrities come and talk about how much they hate Donald Trump. A couple years ago, it was how much they love Barack Obama. It has gotten so low and so unpopular that even President Trump is boycotting this weekend for the second year in a row. Listen, I think that there's a really important place that dinner plays in providing scholarships and helping with a foundation that's important. But the fact of the matter is that the celebrity cult of all this, all these parties, are over the top. And I think that there has to be a real big. What do you think about this, Clark Kent? I think I would sell the weekend. It's about time they did something else. And Clark Kent, do you have a buy or sell?
Yeah, Clark is kind of like a fireball, and the two of us together were very overheated at the moment.
Yeah, I saw that, yes. Hey, thank you for joining the Feehery podcast brought to you by EFB. Clark Kent, thank you so much for participating. You didn't really add any thoughts to this whole process.
Well, he whispered to Adam.
whisper.
I saw that a couple times.
And this is awesome. Thank you, and please, if you like this podcast or you like our dog, please share away. Thank you.
Yeah, baby.